It's 7 o'clock. We're going to get started. I'm running this like a college course. So if you missed the course, that's fine. Nobody's taking attendance. It's fine if you're not here, but you're still responsible for the content and making up the work that you missed. Tonight is all about connecting the dots. So how are we going to apply everything that you've learned up to this point, plus your DISC results? If you don't remember what your DISC letter is, you got to go back and review that because you need that letter in order to piece things together tonight. And there's a bit of new information that's going to help you determine topics for your Common App. We're going to cover the most common mistakes, what admissions officers are looking for, including the red flags that you may not even be aware of, and the single most costly mistake that you could be making in high school that could jeopardize your college applications. The first thing I want you to do is open a blank Google Docs. You can take notes on a piece of paper, but a Google Doc would be great because you're going to have to share this with me at the end of the meeting. We're going to use your notes to help find the best topic for you and where you should be focusing on your free writing. Tonight is going to build on the last 2 Mondays. So if you missed all of those videos, you're probably going to want to watch them in order and then let me know when you've seen the first and the second Monday night so that I can share the free writing doc with you. It's July 6th. We want to start our free writing and all of our work on our essays on the July 4th holiday so that by Labor Day, you are finished. Okay, so let's dive in and do this. All right, hopefully you've got your Google Doc open. You're ready to take notes. Remember that you're going to be sending me these notes. So we're going to back up a little bit. We're going to do a quick review of the things we've already talked about. Last week, we talked about the folding your arms exercise. Remember, fold your arms and then uncross your arms and fold them again with the other arm on top. And how does that feel? And what happened for you when we did that? And we got a lot of adjectives: unnatural, uncomfortable, weird. A lot of times I get the adjective wrong. It felt wrong. So I want to talk to you about the 4-minute mile. The 4-minute mile for many decades was considered dangerous and impossible. So let's look at wrong, dangerous, and impossible on our list of adjectives here, okay? These are mental models. We spent some time talking about mental models in the last weeks. We're going to spend a lot more time tonight talking about mental models are a way to understand how something works in the world. It's people's perception of how things work. Mental models can be helpful in that a set of conditions equals a rule of action. It automates decision-making. Remember when you were learning how to drive and all of the things that were going through your head at one time, slowing down at yellow and stopping at red and the turn signals, just all of the components of learning how to drive. We start building mental models and muscle memory on that. And so it becomes more automatic. So mental models can be very helpful in automating that decision-making. When you see a yellow light, you know that you need to start slowing down, because if you don't and you miss that yellow, you could be in an intersection when somebody else is green, and that could be not good. So mental models are helpful that it eliminates hesitation by deciding beforehand what you will do. This is a great lesson for college, guys. The time to make some of these life decisions is not when you're in the moment. So you're deciding beforehand what you're going to do. You're going to decide beforehand, I am not going to run a red light because I know what can happen if I do. I know that I'm not going to drink and drive because I know what can happen if I do. So mental models can be very helpful and they can be very useful. Take, for example, your alarm. When your alarm goes off in the morning, you know that you need to wake up. You know that you need to get up. You know that there's things that you need to do. We know that Steve Jobs used a mental model of a black turtleneck. He just wore it every day because it eliminated the decision for him. I think President Obama did the same thing. He wore the same suit every day because it just eliminated some of the decisions that he had to make during the day. And for someone who has to make a great number of really important decisions during a day, one less decision is really empowering. So mental models, they can eliminate choice, they can save brain power, they beat procrastination. Those of you who struggle with procrastination, mental models can help you with that. They provide internal stability in a world of constant change. Our world is constantly changing. But even when you're in the thick of traffic, you know that green means go. However, mental models can also make us resistant to change or instruction. They form muscle memory. So once you've formed muscle memory, a mental model will reinforce that muscle memory. Mental models can also blind us to facts or ideas or make it difficult for us to challenge our deeply held beliefs. Remember what happened when you changed directions. What are some of your mental models? I know for a fact that you have a mental model of sitting down to write a rough draft. And this is why I keep harping on it, because I know how destructive that is for you and what a huge time waste it's going to be, especially once you get to college. So those of you who are already doing the 15-minute free writing exercises daily, I've heard from a couple of you that this was a completely new idea, that you'd never thought about it before, and that you're trying it, and that you're open to it, and that it seems to be working well so far. Let's talk about adjectives. Let's especially talk about the adjective wrong, because just because something feels wrong, that's a feeling, okay? And feelings are not facts. Adjectives are not facts. Facts are facts. Adjectives are not facts. So unnatural, uncomfortable, weird, wrong, those are all adjectives. So are curious, humble, and teachable. And I want you to really think about curious, humble, and teachable. We're going to talk about this at the very end today. Students who are curious, humble, and teachable are not making the biggest mistake that a lot of students make their senior year of high school, their junior year and their senior year, that can sabotage their college apps. So let's just put that aside. We're going to come back to that. So adjectives are indicators. If you get the feeling that this feels wrong, if your brain is telling you, I already know this, I want you to switch around. But what can I learn from this? If your brain is telling you, this isn't going to work for me, what I want you to ask yourself instead is, how can I make this work for me? Because just like you can change adjectives without changing a situation and a fact in front of you, you can also change these indicators and you can change your reaction to it. So if you feel like something isn't going to work for you, if you simply ask yourself a different question, how can I make this work for me? Suddenly, you're approaching it with a different mindset. And I'm hopeful that's what you're going to do here with me tonight, because I've done this with 211 students. And if I started naming off the colleges where these students got accepted, I know that I probably will name one of those colleges that's in your top 3. And for many of you, there's at least one college in your top 3 that's a reach, if not an unlikely. And I have seen this work for students. So I hope that you'll open your mind, you'll be curious, you'll be teachable, and you'll give this a shot, okay? Because college is, the whole point of college is to challenge your mental models, but safely, okay? We want you to challenge it safely. There's another reason why I want for your high school teachers to see you as curious, humble, and teachable. And if they don't see you as curious, humble, and teachable, and your letters of recommendation show a completely different side of you than you're showing, guess what happens? We're going to come back to that, okay? I don't want you to be a student in your high school who is arrogant, demanding, disorganized, or procrastinative. Those are not adjectives that bode well with college applications. I want your high school counselor and your high school teachers to write about you as a student who's curious, humble, and teachable. I want you to ask yourself, why do I have this mental model? Where did it come from? And does it still serve me? There were times in college, there was one time I could remember in particular when I was in the dorm, in the basement of my dorm, doing laundry, and one of my friends came down and she was doing her laundry at the same time that I was doing mine. We were getting our clothes out of the dryer, and she was doing something with her clothes that I was not allowed to do when I lived at home with my mom. And I said, wow, tell me more about that. And she said, yeah, I just do this. This is how I do my laundry. And I was thinking, I guess I could do that too. I'm here. These are my clothes. I'm in the dorm. My mom's not doing my laundry. My mom's not going to see my laundry. I could make this change. So that's a really insignificant and small sample of the things that are going to hit you when you're in college, where you have to confront the question, does this mental model still serve me? Does the mental model of sitting down to write a rough draft still serve me? I hope by the end of your time with me, you're going to learn that no, it does not. So let's talk about the 4-minute mile again, okay? Because in the 1940s, it was considered not only dangerous, but impossible. But on May 6th of 1954, Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile barrier, okay? Today, high school athletes do it all the time. When I was a high schooler in volleyball daily doubles in the summer, I was running a 4-minute mile. So this is where students say, wait, I thought this was going to be an essay workshop. It is, okay, it is. But to break a mental model is harder than splitting the atom. Einstein got it right. It's really hard to break these mental models. So I have to really drill this down into you so that you'll trust me and believe me and give it a try. And once you give it a try, you might be more inclined to give something else a try, and then something else. And then you start to re-examine why you have mental models and whether or not they're still serving you. And some of them will still serve you. Some of them you should hold on to, but some of them deserve to be re-examined. So I want to just show you this quick slide. This is where you're all from right now. You're from all across the country. I love that my students are from all over the country, and I love the diversity of perspectives that I'm getting this year from students. So this is what we're going to cover tonight, and it looks like a lot. I'm going to break it down into more than one video, and we're going to go through it really quickly. We've already covered the first two. Okay, so 1 and 2 are already done. Let's do a bit more of a deep dive into mental models. Okay, so mental models are how we understand the world. It's your thought process about how something works. Mental models are useful, but they're also imperfect, and they can be constructive or destructive depending on how you use them. They affect how we see problems and people. And this is the whole crux of college, okay, is the critical thinking about how we see problems and other people. Let's look at how mental models affect how we see problems in people, okay? A botanist looks at a forest and focuses on the ecosystem, whereas an environmentalist sees the impact of climate change. A forestry engineer sees the state of tree growth. A business person looks at the value of the land. None of these are wrong, but none of them are able to describe the full scope of the forest. So sometimes you can have a mental model that's just one component of the bigger picture. I'm going to read you this quote. The first rule is that you can't really know anything if you just remember isolated facts and try to bang them back. If the facts don't hang together on a lattice work of theory, you don't have them in usable form. You have to have the models in your head, and you've got to array your experiences both vicariously and directly on this lattice work of models. You may have noticed students who try to remember and pound back what is remembered. They fail in school and life. You've got to hang experience on a lattice work of models in your head. Okay, so students who are just rote memorization, they're not going to do that well with the critical thinking that's required in life. The lattice work of models that you build in your head is what's going to serve you. This is what I'm trying to tie you in with today. And you maybe have never seen this before. You've maybe never heard of Charlie Munger before. He's got this multidisciplinary lattice work of mental models. Okay. And there's all these components to it. There's 8 different sections. We are not going to go through all 8 tonight. I promise you. We are going to skim the surface of 3 so that I can show you the tremendous amount of information that's available here and the ones that are specific to this task at hand, which is your college application essay. So we're going to start with core thinking concepts. There's 9 different subcategories. We're not going to go through all 9. We're simply going to look at number 2, circle of competence. And we're going to notice that there are blind spots. People have blind spots. What are blind spots? Blind spots are when you are honest about where your knowledge is lacking and you know where you're vulnerable and where you can improve. This goes back to the Johari window, which helps you to understand your DISC assessment. Okay, this is where you're going to want to know what letter you are in your DISC assessment. So in the Johari window, there's information that is known to others. That's up here on the top. And there's information that's only known to ourselves. That's over here along the side. So for example, in this section right here, I know and you know. It's known to others and it's known to self. I know and you know. We both know that I'm an English major. In this one down here, the mask, which is your hidden self, I know this about me, but you don't know this about me. So you maybe don't know about me that I was a first generation college student. You would have no way of knowing that about me unless I told you. Okay, I know this about myself, but this is not generally known to others. Over here in the blind spots, you know, but I don't know. So here's my first blind spot that I really got hammered with when I was a college freshman. My roommate stomped her foot. She'd asked me to borrow something, and I must have said no a lot because she stomped her foot on the ground and she said, "You are the worst sharer ever." And I just stood there processing that. And I was thinking to myself, wow, she's right. I didn't know that about myself. I'm not very good at sharing. And she was right. That was a blind spot for me, huge blind spot. Everybody else could see it, but I couldn't see it. When other people see your blind spots and you don't see them, but you've been confronted with one, that's a huge topic of introspection that you could write about. You should do some free writing about that if you have an example of that happening in your life. Okay. So then the last one is, I don't know and you don't know. So this is the potential. Okay. Maybe you don't know what you want to study. I don't know what you want to study, but I can help you explore that. That's what we're here for. Let's look at another one. Let's look at human nature and judgment. Okay. So there's 23 of them. 23. There is so much information. If you wanted to do a deep dive into this lattice work of mental models, there is so much information out there. We are not going to go through all 23. I highlighted 4 here. Just in language instinct alone, there's all of these things that he talks about, but I want to point out Noam Chomsky, because you're not going to get through your freshman or your sophomore year of college without learning about Noam Chomsky. Okay, there's so much in here. Grammatically ordered language theoretically carries infinite varying meaning. Why is this important? It's important because writing is unlike any other art. Let's think about it. If you play music, the person can just hear it. If you are a chef and you're cooking a meal, the person can taste it. But when you're writing, you're communicating with symbols, and those symbols are on the page. And the person looking at the symbols must first bring it in and then use their own filters to interpret it. And why are we talking about this in context of your college application essays? Because you don't know who your reader is going to be. And in order to keep passing from reader to reader to reader to get you in front of the people who can be the decision maker, you have to be able to communicate with readers on a very broad level. And that reader may not have the first language that you have as a first language. That reader may have filters that you don't have. And so you have to communicate your filters in a way that even somebody who doesn't have those filters can understand it. It's all very important. Let's look at first conclusion bias. We tend to settle on the first conclusions where they lead us, and we accept many erroneous results. We stop asking questions. Remember last week we talked about the 5 layers of why? Never stop asking that question. You cannot stop asking why. Whenever you get stuck, ask the question why. Don't settle for first conclusion bias. Remember, if something feels unnatural or wrong, be curious, be humble, be teachable. I'm going to keep repeating this. What can I learn from this? How can I make this work for me? This is how you be successful as a student. This is how you show your high school teachers that you're going to be successful as a student, and get that communicated in your letters of recommendation. Influence of stress, including breaking points. Stress causes both mental and physical responses and tends to amplify other biases. The elite soldier's model: in the thick of battle, you will not rise to the level of your expectations, but you will fall to the level of your training. Training is super important. This is why I've given you this DISC assessment, is because I want you to understand where you default when you're stressed. Remember, we talked about these graphs when we went over your DISC assessment. The graph on the left is your public self. Your graph in the middle is your core and private self. This is where you go when you're stressed. In this example, when this person is stressed, that S comes up really high. And this graph on the right is your perceived self. This is the person who you see yourself as, but sometimes as you see yourself in ways that others don't see you. Remember, I didn't know that I didn't share well until my roommate pointed it out. This middle graph is your instinctive response to stress. So I just want you to be aware of that, because during times of stress, you're not going to rise to your level of expectation. You're going to fall to your level of training. So if you're stressed in college because you have an essay that you need to write, I hope the first thing you do is you sit down and you start free writing and you start breaking it down. Okay. I hope you revert back to this training. So you go back to your DISC assessment and remember how we went over all of these letters. These people are outgoing. These are more reserved. These people are task-oriented. These are people-oriented people. You have to know where you fall on this graph in order to use this for you. 69% of the population, and it's not just the population across the board in the whole entire world, because not everybody in the entire world has taken the DISC assessment. But of those who've taken it, 69% are C's, 17% are S's, and 11% are I's. Only 3% are D's. Here's one more lattice work: core thinking concepts. And there's 9 of them here. We're only going to look at circle of competence, okay? We have blind spots. We've already talked about blind spots. And when you're honest about where your knowledge is lacking, you know where you're vulnerable and where you can improve. So where's a blind spot or an area of improvement that makes you think of a story? Because that story could be a great Common App essay. For example, if you're a C, if your blind spot is that you focus too much on perfection and you need to focus on excellence, not so much perfection, or you need to set time limits in order to reach your deadlines. These are some more personal growth areas for C's. I've shared all of these with you. They're all in that DISC folder. I've shared them with you. So if you can think of a time where you didn't increase your pace fast enough to accomplish the goal, maybe you were so focused on perfection that your pace was too slow and you missed out on the entire thing, that would be a great topic for you to write about. If you are an S, in order to correct your blind spots, you need to learn to accept change. So when did you not accept change? When did you not balance the needs of others with your own? Is there a story in there that you could talk about? Here are some more areas that you could dive into in your free writing. If you can think of a time when you needed to be more flexible or show more initiative, do some free writing on these topics and see what comes out of it. If you are an I, there might have been a time where you talked too much and you didn't listen and you missed something really important. So those are all areas that you can start free writing on right now. And you can use these blind spots to your advantage in your college application essays. We're going to do one more: human nature and judgment. What we believe is what we choose to see. It's a deeply ingrained mental habit, both energy conserving and comfortable, to look for confirmations of long-held wisdom rather than violations. However, the scientific process, including hypothesis generation, blind testing when needed, objective statistical rigor, it's designed to root out precisely the opposite, which is why it works so well when it's followed. This is why we have the scientific process, because we believe what we choose to see. That's just the nature of mental models. So if you're going to believe what you choose to see to break a mental model, is harder than splitting the atom. It's really hard to break these mental models. So that was the lattice work of mental models and the Johari window. I hope that this was helpful so that you can understand why I'm unpacking all of this for you, because it illustrates the importance of writing about things where you were not perfect. And your instinct may be to keep selling yourself as this perfect, polished student and individual who's doing all these things. But that's not necessarily the strongest common app essay. We're looking for ways that you tripped up, for ways that you did something wrong and had to pivot or recalibrate or learn or change or re-examine. We touched on this just a bit last week. Vilfredo Pareto, he coined the Pareto principle and the 80-20 rule, where 80% of outcomes result in 20% of causes. Okay, so how can we use this in our writing? By breaking the muscle memory of spending 80% of our efforts in our writing focused on grammar, spelling, and punctuation. It's just a huge waste of your time. I want you to instead spend your time where it's going to pay off. I want you to identify the inputs that are potentially the most productive and make them the priority. I showed you this graph last week. I took rough draft and final draft. I whited them out because you are responsible for everything gray in these essays. I'm handing you the blue and I'm going to do the pink for you if you're not doing it yourself at the end. So when you focus your efforts on the most productive inputs and you make these 3 things a priority in your college application essay, guess what? You're going to get way better results. You need to be focused on pre-writing. I told you last week, you're going to spend 50% of your time here. The research that you're doing is on the schools that you're applying to. What are these schools about? What do they have that's going to be a good fit for you? And your thesis is your 1-sentence answer to the question that the prompt is asking. You have to answer these questions. So if you're a C, these are areas that you can be thinking about as topics. If you're an S, you might want to be thinking about some of these. If you're an I, here's some more that you can think about. Breaking the muscle memory of, will you edit this for me, to asking for feedback. How's my content? I don't care if the words are misspelled. Am I on to something here? Is my content good? I already know that you can write. You wouldn't be here in front of me right now if you were not able to write. I want to focus on what's the content of what you can talk about in these essays. Okay, crossing that off and moving right along.